Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is February 2026, and today we are looking at a story that, on the surface, just sounds like, a press release about corporate real estate. But it's actually a story about strategy, about growth, and really the shifting center of gravity in African aviation.
Yeah.
Ethiopian Airlines is packing its boxes.
That's one way to put it.
Right. They're preparing to move into a new headquarters this coming August. And look, companies move offices all the time.
Sure.
Usually it means, better coffee machines, maybe an open plan layout that everybody hates. But this feels different.
It is different. We're talking about an airline that has operated from the exact same base for over 6 decades.
6 decades?
It's massive. I mean,
Yeah.
to give you a sense of the scale here, the last time Ethiopian Airlines moved into a new headquarters, the Boeing 747 hadn't even been invented yet.
Wow.
We're talking about the early 1960s. The whole world of aviation was just completely different.
So the mission for this deep dive is to look past the ribbon-cutting ceremony. We've got a stack of reports here, financials, architectural specs, and some really, really interesting comments from the CEO. We want to unpack what this $80 million investment actually signals. Because you don't spend that kind of cash just to get a better view of the runway.
No, you absolutely don't. And frankly, $80 million is a number we need to contextualize a bit.
Okay.
Because in the world of global corporate HQs, that's actually surprisingly modest.
That was my first thought. You see these tech companies in California dropping billions on, glass spaceships. $80 million for the continent's largest airline? Is that really enough to move the needle, or are they cutting corners somewhere?
It's a fair question, but I think to answer that, we have to look at why they're moving in the first place.
Right.
This isn't a vanity project. If you look at the source material, they aren't moving because they want to. They're moving because the old building is actively strangling their operations.
There's this one statistic in the report that I had to circle, twice. It says the airline has expanded more than 20-fold since the original headquarters was built.
20-fold.
20?
It's a staggering
number. And I don't think people really grasp what that does to a company's its nervous system.
So break that down for us, because I'm picturing a house built for a family of 4, and suddenly you have 80 people trying to live in it.
That's a good start, but it's even more complex than just crowding. Think about the complexity of running an airline in, say, 1964 versus 2026. Back then, you had manual ticketing, simple radio comms, maybe a dozen routes. Today, Ethiopian is running a global digital operation. You've got complex IT servers, real-time flight tracking, crew scheduling for thousands of employees across 24 time zones, beta security, HR.
And you're trying to run all of that through walls that are filled with, copper wiring from the Beatles era?
Exactly. The report quotes the airline admitting the old building had become challenging for operations.
Which is the most polite corporate speak for a total nightmare, a scream for help. It means your departments are siloed because they're physically jammed into corners. It means your decision-making slows down because the person you need to talk to is in a temporary annex 3 buildings away.
So this new build, which is right next to the old site near Boli International Airport, it isn't about luxury.
No.
It's about plumbing. It's about building a container that actually fits the liquid inside.
It's an infrastructure correction. They are playing catch-up. The source says the new HQ is fully modernized and designed specifically to support the carrier's future growth. If they didn't do this, that physical infrastructure would eventually just cap their growth. You simply can't run a 21st century superconnector airline from a mid-century administrative block.
Let's talk about the building itself, because usually when a major company in a developing economy builds a new HQ, the instinct is to go vertical.
Build a monument.
Yeah. Put your logo in the cloud so everyone knows you've arrived. But the group CEO, Mesfin Tasso, said something that felt like a very specific dig at his neighbors.
Ah, you mean the skyscraper comment?
I do. He says, and I'm quoting here, "It isn't a skyscraper like the commercial bank of Ethiopia's building, but it fits the airline's needs." Now, I know that bank building, it's the tallest in East Africa. It's huge. Why call them out like that?
I don't know if I'd call it calling them out so much as drawing a philosophical line in the sand.
Okay.
It's a brilliant distinction. A bank sells stability, right? A bank builds a skyscraper to say, we are unshakable, we are momentous, we are here forever. It's all about prestige and dominance.
And an airline.
An airline sells movement. An airline is about logistics, flow, efficiency. If you build a 50-story tower, you're just creating vertical silos. Your flight ops team is on floor 12, your maintenance executives are on floor 30. That kills collaboration.
So they went horizontal instead.
They went with a campus. The specs show it covers over 33,000 square meters, but it's broken into 6 interconnected buildings.
Interconnected, that's the key word there.
It's the most important word in the whole architectural brief. It means you can walk from one department to another without waiting for an elevator. It mimics the flow of an airport hub itself. It's designed purely to speed up information transfer.
So how tall is it then?
The main block is only 45 meters high, maybe, 12 to 15 stories. It's grounded, it's functional.
It reminds me a bit of the big tech campuses in Silicon Valley, or some of the newer European manufacturing hubs. It's less about look at me and more about let's get work done.
Which aligns perfectly with Ethiopian Airlines brand. I mean, they've never really been about glitz in the way that, say, Emirates or Qatar Airways emphasize luxury.
No, they haven't.
Ethiopian has always been the reliable workhorse of Africa, the Pan-African connector. This building reflects that identity perfectly.
I do want to touch on who actually built this thing, because it's an interesting mix. You have the China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, CCEC, doing the heavy lifting.
Right. No surprise there. They're ubiquitous in African infrastructure.
Yeah, that's the standard for the region. But the design, it's a collaboration. You had Sona and partner architect from Austria working with BT Architects, which is a local Ethiopian firm.
And that partnership is crucial. If you just fly in a European architect, you often get a beautiful glass box that turns into a greenhouse in the African sun and costs a fortune to cool.
Right.
But if you only use a local firm, maybe you miss out on some of the global best practices for these really specialized aviation facilities.
So the Austrians bring the global standard, and the locals bring the context.
And that, again, is the airline's entire business model in a nutshell. Global standards, flying Boeings and Airbuses, adhering to FAA and EASA safety regs, but operating with deep local context and a hub strategy that is uniquely African.
Okay, we have to pivot to the money. Because looking at the financials in the sidebar here, my earlier question about whether $80 million was enough seems almost irrelevant.
Yeah, irrelevant compared to how much cash they're burning elsewhere. The capital expenditure numbers are eye-watering.
They allocated $302 million for capital projects. But here's the kicker. That was just for the first half of the current fiscal year.
Just put that in perspective. That's over $500 million annualized just on capital projects, infrastructure, facilities, equipment. The $80 million for the HQ is barely a quarter of their 6-month spend.
What does that tell you? Because to me, that signals an airline that isn't just doing okay. That signals aggressive expansion.
It signals they're in a phase of heavy asset accumulation. Most legacy carriers in the U.S. or Europe, they're all trying to become asset light.
Right. They lease planes, they outsource maintenance.
They sell off their real estate. Ethiopian is doing the exact opposite. They are buying, building, and owning. They're digging a moat.
And speaking of digging a moat, this brings us to what was, for me, the most surprising detail in the entire research packet. We need to talk about Boeing.
This is the detail that most people will gloss over, but it's probably the most significant for the long term.
The report mentions, almost as a throwaway line, that the airline generated $2.5 million in revenue from supplying inputs for Boeing 737 MAX aircraft.
Right.
Now, $2.5 million in the context of a $302 million spending spree is peanuts. It's a rounding error. So why should we care that they sold a few parts to Boeing?
Because of what it implies about capability. You can't just wake up one morning and decide to sell parts to Boeing. You don't just weld something together in a garage and ship it off to Seattle.
You're talking about certification.
I'm talking about AS9100 certification levels. I'm talking about precision engineering where your tolerances are measured in microns. For Ethiopian Airlines to be supplying inputs, and I really wish the report specified what those were, wire harnesses, thermal blankets, whatever. It means they have achieved a level of industrial manufacturing quality that matches Western Europe or North America.
So they aren't just flying the planes anymore.
No. And that is a massive shift. Historically, African airlines have been customers. They buy the plane, they buy the parts, they pay the consultants. Ethiopian is flipping the flow. They're taking money from Boeing.
That feels like a huge strategic hedge, doesn't it? If another pandemic hits and nobody is flying, you could still run the factory.
Exactly. It diversifies their revenue stream. But more importantly, it changes their relationship with the manufacturer. They aren't just a client anymore, they're a partner. They are integrated into the global industrial chain.
And that 2.5 million is just a seed?
It's a seed. If they can grow that to 25 million or 250 million over the next decade, they stop being just an airline and start becoming an aerospace industrial complex.
That is a fascinating trajectory.
Yeah.
But I want to pull back and look at the map for a second. We have the new HQ opening in August 2026. We have this industrial capability growing, but where are they actually flying? There's a note here about 2028 and Australia.
The final frontier.
It sounds dramatic, but it kind of is, right? They're planning to launch flights to Australia in 2028.
And this is significant because it completes the set. Once they land in Australia, Ethiopian Airlines will serve every inhabited continent on Earth. Africa, Europe, Asia, North America, South America, and Australia.
Is that rare?
It's an incredibly exclusive club. Very few airlines actually touch all 6 continents with their own metal. It requires a specific geographic advantage, which Addis Ababa has, and the right long-range fleet.
But let's be real, Australia is a logistical nightmare from East Africa. That is a long, long flight.
Oh, it pushes the absolute limits of range and crew duty times. You're likely looking at ultra-long-haul operations, maybe a technical stop, maybe pushing the absolute maximum range of their 787s or A350s.
And this brings us right back to the building.
It does.
You can't manage a 6-continent operation with a whiteboard and a fax machine.
Precisely. When you're coordinating flights to Sydney, landing slots in London, departures from New York, and connections in Sao Paulo, the data load is immense. That $80 million headquarters is the brain that makes the Australia 2028 flight possible.
It's the command center.
You need a centralized, high-tech command center to manage that level of global complexity.
It all sounds incredibly optimistic.
Yeah.
They're growing, they're building, they're manufacturing. But I want to play devil's advocate for a minute.
Okay.
Because we can't talk about Ethiopian Airlines without talking about Ethiopia.
The national context. It's always there.
We have some pretty sobering data in the sidebar here. While the airline is spending $300 million in 6 months, the country itself is ranking 96th on Transparency International's corruption index. We have the finance minister pleading with donors for predictable financing. It's a stark contrast.
It is a stark contrast.
So how do you reconcile that? You have a government struggling with governance pressures and budget shortfalls, effectively asking for aid, while its own state-owned airline is building a futuristic campus and funding global expansion.
Well, economists often call this an enclave economy. You see it in the oil industry a lot, but here we're seeing it with an airline. Ethiopian Airlines operates almost like a state within a state.
So it's insulated?
To a very large degree, yes. It generates its revenue in hard currency, dollars, euros, pounds from all those ticket sales abroad. This protects it from local currency inflation. It has its own management structure that historically the government has been smart enough to leave alone.
That's the key, right? Leave alone.
It is the golden rule. The government treats the airline as a cash cow and a strategic national asset, but they don't treat it like a typical government ministry. They let the airline run like a business.
But that tension has to be real.
It's very real. When you have a shiny new $80 million campus rising up next to the airport, while the broader economy is facing governance pressures, it highlights a widening gap.
So does the airline success actually help the country, or does it just sort of float above it?
It definitely helps. It brings in foreign currency, it employs thousands of people, it keeps Addis Ababa relevant as a diplomatic capital, but it also creates a situation where the airline is sprinting while the rest of the economy is, jogging or maybe stumbling.
And the risk?
The risk is always that the national struggles could eventually drag the airline down. But so far, their enclave strategy seems to be holding.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
Don't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, even if the farm itself is struggling.
And this move to the new HQ, it just reinforces that separation. By building a self-contained, modern, secure campus, they are further insulating themselves from any external inefficiencies. They are building their own reliable ecosystem.
So they don't have to rely on the city's infrastructure as much.
Exactly.
So let's wrap this up. We're looking at August 2026. The boxes are packed. The trucks are moving. What's the headline for you?
The headline for me is maturation. For 60 years, they were a scrappy, growing carrier. Now they're an institution. They're moving into a facility that finally matches their reality.
A facility that prioritizes function over form.
Which is a lesson a lot of Western companies could probably learn.
And they're setting the stage for that 2028 jump to Australia.
completing the global circle.
But the thing that really sticks with me is that Boeing revenue, that $2.5 million. It's so small now. But I want to leave you with this thought. If an airline can teach itself to build aerospace-grade components to the point where Boeing writes them a check, what happens in 10 years?
That is the question.
Does Ethiopian Airlines eventually spin off a manufacturing division that rivals the airline itself? Are we watching the birth of an African Airbus supplier, disguised as an airline just moving offices?
When you look at the investment, the training, and just the sheer ambition, I wouldn't bet against it.
We will have to wait and see. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the new Ethiopian Airlines HQ. We will catch you on the next one.